So I was like, absolutely, I'd love to speak to Larry again. Okay, so the deck I'm going to go through today will give a little bit of history on Talkpoint, and if that's a little repetitive, maybe I can skip through that and really get to the meat of the presentation. But the genesis of the data that I put together was I was asked towards the latter part of last year and early this year to sit on a couple of panels to talk about video trends and do a couple of interviews. And on the panels, in each situation, I wound up batting cleanup. So there were some really good industry experts who were in front of me who presented really good data that they got mostly from the Frost and Sullivans and the Gartners and the Wayne Houses of the world. So in batting cleanup in the presentation, I said, God, if I just repeat that type of information, it's going to be kind of boring. And I did some face-to-face stuff in panels, and I also did a couple of webinars as well, too. So what I decided to do is actually collect data from real information, real users within the world of Talkpoint. And I'm gonna kind of go through this right now. So a little history on Talkpoint. We're founded back in 1999. I was actually the original founder of the company. Our roots go back to a venture known as CNBC Dow Jones Desktop Video, which was a joint venture set up amongst Microsoft, NBC, and Dow Jones to distribute CNBC core television content over the internet using a technology called NetShow, which now has evolved into Windows Media. So this venture was started out in the mid-90s, way ahead of its time. The whole idea was that you come into a website after hours and watch CNBC news clips in a pay-per-view environment. Now, we think nothing of doing that today, but think about doing that in 1995. Almost impossible. Broadband didn't exist. Media players weren't inherent in operating systems. So the venture kind of struggled. So we actually purchased the assets. We started a company called NextVenue, caught the internet wave, filed for a public offering, sold it to iBeam Broadcasting. iBeam was acquired by the Williams companies, and then Williams went through a restructure in 04, 05 timeframe, and I had the opportunity to buy back the original company, and that's when we founded Talkpoint. We provide technology and services for webcasting and virtual meetings. We're absolutely a SaaS-based model. We're not in the hardware business. Everything is done through a browser, accessing our data centers that we have distributed throughout the United States and Europe, and it allows us to provide a lot of scale. We have an overlay production services offering that we have for people who want to require it, who don't want to use the software services. But our services are purely audio and video webcasting. Large, live, interactive, and secure is really our environment that we work in. We've got a pretty robust list of enterprise-level clients. We grew up in the financial markets sector, then kind of spread our wings into pharmaceuticals, life sciences, publishing, and then technology. And then we've got a bunch of vertical and horizontal applications that we support. Once again, 95% of the technology is the same behind the scenes, and then we tweak it from a security perspective or maybe reporting or something on the registration side that really speaks to the business users within these particular vertical markets. One of the verticals I like to speak about today is publishing. We've probably worked with over 100 publishers right now, mostly doing webinars. So I went back and batting cleanup for these other panels and said, look, instead of us going to published research from research professionals, why don't we just generate some of our own research? So what I did is I did a year-over-year comparison, full year 2009 to full year 2010, and looked at all the webcasts we did in the publishing space, and I've got some data here I'd like to talk about. What we noticed is that publishers are now starting to incorporate video into their webinars. Historically, webinars are done in the publishing sector. They're for lead generation. They drive sponsorship revenues, and it gives print publishers the ability to drive additional revenue streams leveraging the internet. Historically, speakers are scattered about. They have, or the thought leaders, and they're typically done using audio webinars. However, over the last year, we tracked the fact that people are doing video ad insertion, the ability to drop a file into an audio presentation. They're doing video roll-ins, which could either be commercials or introductions, which are video files that prior to the actual audio event. And then we have some clients who are doing full video webinars. And from a year-over-year comparison perspective, video ad insertion from 2009 to 2010 increased. It was in 9% of the webinars that we did, and it increased to 22%. Now, we're growing as a company about 25% year over year, so that's really significant. So not only was the 9% of a smaller number of webinars, the 22% is of a larger number of webinars. So it's even, from a real number perspective, it's actually larger. Video roll-ins were used in 2009 in 12% of the presentations. or 12% of the webinars, and that increased to 27%, almost one-third of the webinars that we did in the publishing space use some semblance of a video roll-in. And in many cases, that's an advertiser running a commercial who's paying for sponsorship. And then full video webinars. In the full year 2009, this is where speakers are actually on camera and doing a video broadcast. Only 5% of the publishers leveraged video technology, but it increased to 11%, more than doubled in a year-over-year perspective. And we see that trend increasing over time as people start to leverage technologies like Skype. Webcams become more efficient, webcam switching becomes easier to use, and ultimately the technology of the desktop becomes more ubiquitous. Other trends we see companies who weren't traditionally in the video business moving into the video business. And one of the case studies we use is a company called Broadridge. Broadridge is a $3.5 billion company that was spun off by ADP a couple of years ago, and they really control the proxy information market. So the way Broadridge works is they have a database of shareholders, and they bridge the gap between the issuers, the public companies, and the brokerage houses. So Larry, if you had a share of Intel held with Charles Schwab, ultimately Intel is responsible for you as the individual shareholder and getting you proxy information so that you can vote your shares. However, they don't see you as the record holder. They actually see the beneficial record holder as being Schwab. Yet they're still responsible to get you as the individual shareholder that information. So Broadridge controls the database, has about 95% of the public market, and ultimately sends you that information. And that's those sometimes those documents you get inundated with around tax time, around year end, for voting all the shares that you own in the stocks. Broadridge controls that market. They tried to come up or have come up with a technology now or a service offering that leverages that. And the idea is that they wanted to create what they call a virtual shareholder meeting. Now, this isn't your traditional webcast of a virtual or a shareholder meeting where it's just what we call spray and pray. Throw it on the internet, hope people show up. This is actually a full-blown system that authenticates you as an individual shareholder, says that you are a shareholder of the stock, allows you to come in, and you're absolutely, they have a online voting system that allows you to actually vote your shares in real time. And we've done these for companies like Dell and Intel and others. This is maybe a $400 to $500 million market opportunity for them. They currently have 8,000 public companies, public issuers that they control this data for. And we're seeing a huge trend to companies on the high end adding the virtual shareholder meetings on to supplement their physical meeting, and on the smaller end of issuers, eliminating a physical meeting and put them all online. In fact, Intel did the last 2 years, Intel did a combination of both a physical and a virtual, and next year they've announced that they're only doing one online. So the idea is this is a company that has absolutely nothing to do with video technology, has incorporated video into a product suite, and it's something they're aggressively going out to market and sell. And like I said, it's a very big opportunity for Broadridge. We are fully integrated with Broadridge from a technology perspective. Some other trends we see from just in general from a video webcasting perspective, I went back and looked at all the video webcasts that we did over the course of a year. Talkpoint does approximately 15,000 live webcasts a year, and that's what we did in 2010. But I wanted to talk specifically about the number of viewers in the market segments we work in from a size perspective. Size does matter, right? So from a year-over-year perspective, we saw that video webcasts with over 1,000 simultaneous viewers live increased by 23%. So on the high end, anything over 1,000, and our technology scales up to 15 to 20,000 simultaneous users. Most companies don't need that kind of scale. We have it available to us. We like to characterize ourselves as being industrial strength, but anything over 1,000 starts to get meaningful in size. We saw a 23% increase. Over 5,000 simultaneous viewers, we saw a 17% increase in the number of webcasts from 2010 to 2009 that increased usage in that size. And then finally, on the low end, less than 250 viewers, which gets a little bit collaborative. I mean, collaborative can be defined as 30 people, or to us, we live in the world of chunks of 1,000. We saw a 27% increase for video webcasts with less than 250 viewers. And that's people leveraging encoding software that runs on their desktop, the webcam, and their VCUs. So we're seeing growth big at the top end and at the low end. The low end of the pyramid is obviously the largest opportunity for us, and that's the biggest opportunity from a growth perspective. And what's driving the growth? Media players are now built directly into the operating systems. You cannot buy a computer without a media player. I remember back in the days of when we first bought the business from CNBC Desktop Video, going out to Morgan Stanley and helping them load media players on the trading floor. They did not have a standard. Broadband is pervasive right now. The anecdote I like to use is that my parents have a broadband connection. I don't think they know how to use it, but they actually have one. I don't think you know anybody without a broadband connection. We have 4G wireless hotspots now that we use in the field, and you can push 5, 6, 7 megabits of bandwidth off a wireless hotspot. And really, from a usability perspective, people are really comfortable watching video on their computers. And YouTube drives that. I like to think that Talkpoint drives that, but the reality is the tide is rising with us, and we're rising along with it. And the idea is that most corporate executives have higher speed machines or more powerful computing technology on their home desktops than they do in the office. So IT staffs are scrambling now to open up firewalls, make sure their proxy servers are set up to support video. And so corporate executives are now expecting to see video because they can do it at home, and their kids are watching it and producing it. My son produces video clips on YouTube every day. So we all have to get accustomed to it. Trends we see from a video signal acquisition perspective, if you go back years ago, everything was done at the broadcast level. It was either satellite trucks or leveraging video backhaul through companies like Vivix, people leveraging their studios. Now we see people using their encoders, using their video conferencing units and their telepresence. So every single video source or video entrance port for us is a broadcast production point for a live streaming webcast. And we, from a technology perspective, leverage them all. So I'd like to talk about some of those trends. Year-over-year comparison, people using their broadcast studios at the corporate level or people outsourcing to a third-party studio. We saw a 5% increase. Now we're growing from a 25% year over year, so that trend is clearly moving in the wrong direction. It's growing, but it's not growing as fast as the market is growing. Satellite trucks had an 8% decrease from a year over year perspective, which is fine for us because the cost of bringing a truck in and laying professional services on top of our software services to manage that is cumbersome. So we're glad to see that go away. VCU/telepresence is up 28%, and we saw that there was a 70% of the VCUs that we used were connected with IP, not ISDN. If you go back 2 years ago, it was about 50-50 where people were using, when they did use their VCU, they were dialing up on ISDN. Now we're seeing everybody moving to IP. So the QoS networks are working, people are leveraging multicasting, and the corporate networks are getting better, so people are feeling more comfortable leveraging their telepresence devices or their Tandberg units, Polycom units, leveraging IP. Finally, from an on-site encoding perspective, that's where one of our clients actually encodes a video signal and sends it to us. That increased 34%. So any situation where there's upward trends on self-service usability, that bodes well for our business, because really we want to put the tools into the hands of our end users, and we want them to drive the growth of the business. That's how our business scales. Also, we operate in a corporate enterprise, and what we notice is that, as I mentioned earlier, most people have more updated computers at home. They have better, in some cases, better internet connectivity at home. And we see still some legacy trends and legacy technology that exists that we have to operate with. For example, we always joke about IE6. It's still very pervasive at the enterprise level. Microsoft has been trying to end-of-life IE6 for years now. And in fact, someone last week sent me a countdown clock. And Larry, I'll send you this link later. But Microsoft now has a countdown clock to end-of-life IE6. So, here they are with IE9. On the threshold, and they still have IE6, and all of them operate differently. So it's a nightmare for web developers, and for us being in the live broadcasting business, we have to be backwards compatible. So we see that's out there. Bandwidth is always a concern for us in the real world. Now, you always hear people with HD cameras and streaming at 1 megabit. That's great, but that's not going to get through corporate firewalls. People are going to have multicast issues with that stuff. At the end of the day, we're in a mission-critical, actionable information environment where the messaging is more important than necessarily the pixelation on the video. So people want to communicate a message to their constituencies, whether it's their shareholders, whether it's their employees, their business partners, their clients. The idea is that this is mission-critical information, so it's got to get there. And people are watching it off a desktop. So although HD cameras and HD video is great, in the enterprise, it doesn't really bode that well. And what we see from a video streaming and coding speeds perspective is the average ranks between 150 to 500 kilobits. Yeah, you can do a 2 megabit video. We can produce anything people want, but the idea is that people can't necessarily consume it, so we operate in that environment. From a year-over-year comparison, we didn't look at all the webcasts. I did a sampling of 500 video events. That 500 we did in 2009 and 500 we did in 2010, and we saw an increase from 300 kilobit streams that were actually served, real-world data, increased by 23%. So people are producing at 300 kilobit and encoding and streaming out at 300K, 23% more in 2010 than they did in 2009. 400 kilobits increased by 27%, and 500K increased by 12%. Now, keep in mind, this was a sampling of 500 live video events, but it's absolutely real-world data right out of our infrastructure, right out of our databases. So it's something you can bank on. And then some anecdotes that we see from a trending perspective, Larry, is self-service webcasting is really on the increase. We have really driven the business to a SaaS-based model that makes it easy for people to not only produce webcasts, but also to view and what we characterize as consuming them. And the idea is that all you need is a browser. So you can have ubiquitous signal acquisition. You can leverage your encoder, your webcam, like we're doing today. You can leverage your video conferencing unit or your telepresence. And the idea is that we've got to be flexible and it's got to be easy to use. And also Flash viewership in general is on the rise. You see Flash boasts a pretty good penetration, but what we're seeing is more enterprises adopting live streaming of Flash, not just progressive downloads. And there's a major difference. And what we found out in the past or in the recent past, is that a lot of people can watch progressive downloads with Flash, go to YouTube during the business day, but when it comes to watching a live Flash stream, they couldn't. And it's not necessarily firewall issues, but there's a lot of corporate proxy settings, proxy servers out there that will actually block RTMPT. So what we're finding now is companies are starting to open up. IT staffs are scrambling to support streaming Flash, and that bodes well for our business as well. And then there's the battle for the video standards. I love reading what goes on between Adobe, Apple, and Microsoft. Who supports Flash, who doesn't. HTML5 is starting to become more pervasive, but it's not quite there yet from an enterprise level perspective. Like I said, we would love if everybody just used HTML5. That would be easy for us. But the idea is that we're still supporting IE6 in a live broadcasting environment, so it absolutely poses a challenge. One of the anecdotes I always use is I say that Talkpoint is a technology company that's analogous to an aircraft that we took off 10 years ago, and we have not been afforded the ability to land. We take the aircraft, we continue to fly, we refuel it, we refit the seating, we refit the video technology within the aircraft, we rebuild the engine, but we're never allowed to land the aircraft because we're in the live broadcast business. We would do things a lot differently now if we started the company from scratch, but unfortunately or fortunately, we've got several hundred clients. We do 10,000 plus webcasts a year, so we've got to not only stay close to macro trends from a technology perspective and stay on the forefront or the cutting and bleeding edge, but we also got to be backwards compatible. So it'd be great if we didn't have any customers, but we wouldn't have a business if we didn't have any customers. So we're in pretty good shape going forward. We like disruption in the industry. We like the fact that Adobe and Apple argue with each other. It creates opportunities for small companies because we can adapt and improvise much quicker than some of the larger guys. So we're looking at 30% year-over-year growth going into the 2012. We're trending more towards video versus audio, and we're seeing a lot more people taking the tools in-house, and our SaaS tools really starting to take off. And that's going to drive scale for our business. Any questions?
Oh, that was really fantastic.
Thanks. And Larry, it's real world data. This is literally from our archives. So it's not, it hasn't been something that's been filtered and scrubbed by a large research company.
Yeah, exactly.
This is actually data I put together with our team here in terms of real world events.
Well, yeah, and based upon the scale and the customer base and all the different examples,
Right.
Very telling, because when we last spoke just short of a year ago, you had said, the direction is more video,
Right.
companies are getting more comfortable with it. And clearly the data shows, like you said, I'm speaking to you from my day job. which is actually work for Kaiser Permanente.
Right. I know that.
We're a big Cisco shop, being that we've got telepresence, we've got Tandberg, we've got WebEx, and whenever we have to scale to beyond 500 plus connections, we're using LiveStream, which is powered by Talkpoint.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So as you were talking about some of this, I was thinking, yeah, absolutely, because I'm...
Absolutely. It's real world examples. I mean, companies like Cisco and WebEx now are taking our technology, integrating it. And more recently, we've just upgraded to them. They've become a SaaS-based customer of ours. Heretofore, we've provided a fully managed service for them, where our production staff was responsible for actually running the events and production managing the live stream events. The tool set, as of tomorrow, is now in the hands of the production staff at WebEx. So now, WebEx to us is a self-service user of our SaaS-based technology, and for us, because it scales. It drives margin for us. It drives scalability, and they've got 50 now that are running Meeting Center, Event Center, and are also running the Talkpoint tool. And the idea is that we've integrated both with telepresence and Tandberg units so that they can, in an automated fashion, leverage a client's Tandberg unit, their telepresence device, their encoder, or even a webcam to launch a live video broadcast.
And that's the interesting thing with that, is that these type of events that we're doing, which we're using VCUs for signal acquisition.
Right.
We haven't done on-site encoding yet. We've had to bring in a satellite at one point because of the lack of connectivity at this one location.
Right.
Then the IT executives, our top IT leaders, have been using this technology to reach their staff.
Absolutely.
Which are all across the country, thousands of employees, and they love it.
Yeah, it's great.
So fantastic, and congratulations on the success. I appreciate you, kind of starting from the founding and taking us up to now. It gives a real time.
Yeah, I want to background, because honestly, I don't think anybody has been in this business longer than us. And maybe we're just stubborn. I don't know. But we've been in this a long time. And our roots go back to CNBC, Dow Jones. And really, those folks who started that business were the visionaries. They really saw an opportunity to leverage Microsoft technology and CNBC television content to create a product that could be consumed over the internet. The only problem they had is they were about 5 or 6 years ahead of their time.
Absolutely. And I guess too, again, congratulations. And also there's been so much, you mentioned that with Apple and all the big formats, but there's been a huge amount of M&A going on in the video space. And, Talkpoint has been a leader in this space. It's really refreshing.
Right.
That you've had this pioneering as well as autonomous approach to your business.
It does provide us with a lot of flexibility, and I always say, half jokingly, we've never had an original idea. And sometimes our development folks cringe when I say that, but at the end of the day, the reality is that we listen to our customers. They tell us what they need, and then we develop it. The decision tree for us is, what can scale across multiple industries, what can scale across multiple vertical markets, or be sold within a vertical to multiple clients, and then ultimately, what will they pay for, right? Because everybody wants everything, but will they buy it? And it becomes an economic and a technology decision. But our CTO always says, if he hears a request 3 times, it must be real from 3 different people. So everything we've done from a tool perspective and as it relates to feature functionality was absolutely the idea of somebody way smarter than anybody here at Talkpoint.
That's great. And it shows that you listen to your customers.
Absolutely.
The case example you share in the presentation is very telling.
Right.
The fact that a company that has really, their business model is not video, but the fact that they've embraced video as a way to improve their business and their functions.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. In a couple of years from now, physical shareholder meetings probably won't exist, right? Or they'll be fleeting. at best. And the idea is that, and what's interesting, we're seeing both top end, where the Fortune 500 can afford to do both, are doing it, and in a low end, there's I think there's 8 or 9 thousand public issuers in the United States, most of which most of us have never heard of. They typically have it at their annual meeting of the lawyer's office. They're doing them online now. It's less expensive. So it's cost savings, and then ultimately the trends are for more information to support mom and pop shareholder, and to allow a shareholder to actually come in and actually vote their shares real time, and have that security net authentication is something that's not going away. That genie does not go back in the bottle. So we're very bullish on our Broadridge relationship, and the fact that they have 95% of the market doesn't hurt.
Right. And how do you see like the social media integration? What are some customer examples of how they're utilizing social media?
It's funny. We have a absolute social media strategy from Talkpoint proper, in terms of we've got our blog and our Facebook, and we have a Twitter account, and we have folks a whole marketing team that manages our social media presence on the internet. But from a webcasting perspective, I'm of two minds. Webcasting exists as a business because it's not social, because it's really serious. And we work in an environment where people are paying to distribute content. And it's typically actionable, mission-critical information. They're communicating to either, as I mentioned earlier, their constituencies, their shareholders, their business partners, their clients. So they're creating, or they're trying to maintain a single message through all of the different media that are available out there, webcasting being one of them. And when you put a social media aspect into a webcast, where you have viewers potentially rearranging the desktop to move branding around, or chatting with each other, and maybe commenting on the event and tweeting, that is counterintuitive to the singular message. And we think that social media webcasting is not going to be something that's going to be a growth business. Now, we're smart enough to keep an eye on it and make sure that we've got technology and tools that can support it. But most of our customers are very concerned about the DNA of their company, which is their brand. And they're very concerned about making sure they maintain that singular message. And it's so funny. I always hear people in large enterprise talking about recruiting talent, young technology talent, of folks who know how to use all the social media technologies, Twitter and Facebook. And then the minute they get on board, they prohibit them from using it. So I always say, right? So I always say that right now, all the digital agencies are having a bonanza, because they're making money consulting people to use social media at the enterprise level. Because most executives in the enterprise are thinking, I have to do it because everybody else is doing it. They don't really know how to define success, what the metrics are for tracking success, but they know they have to be in social media. So right now, all the agencies are making money. In a couple of years, it's going to be the lawyers. And I've said this on a couple of panels, and people scratch their heads, because what happens when an employee crosses that imaginary line and says something they shouldn't say on the company Twitter feed, or the company Facebook page, or their personal Facebook page? What happens in the publishing sector? I was talking to this chief information officer from IDG. He's got 300 editors who tweet. What happens when one of those editors leave? That Twitter feed is theirs. That audience is their audience. So and the edgier you are, the bit of the following you have. But when does that edginess become a liability? So I think we're going to see, and I think recently there was a woman who got fired for saying something about her company on Facebook, and she actually won the suit. She sued the company because she was fired for something she did in the private sector. So I think we're going to see the lawyers will always find a way to make money. We're going to see tons of lawsuits. And I always say it's analogous to Regulation FD. I don't know if you remember when Reg FD came out after the bubble burst, and it basically said that from an SEC perspective, public companies, no matter what they said, they had to say to everybody. So you'd have these public CEOs and CFOs meet with analysts at the banks, or meet with some of the hedge funds and have private conversations years ago. Well, they can't do that any longer. So if they have a meeting, and that's why there's been a huge boom in our business, because everything gets webcast now. Because the best way to distribute to a global audience is through streaming and webcasting technology. Great for our business. But what's happening now is the exact opposite. The unintended consequences of the SEC mandate is people now saying nothing. So they still have these meetings, but the meetings aren't content rich. So what's going to happen? It's come full circle now. Sarbanes-Oxley was put in place to protect shareholders. Really, it's shareholders are getting less information from public companies, in my opinion, than they did prior to that, as are the industry analysts and also the financial analysts. So I think social media is going to have the exact opposite effect in a couple of years. And we're going to see people saying less over social media, people putting in draconian policies that prohibit the use of social media. And having been on a couple of these panels where people, and I actually hosted a panel where I asked folks from a couple of different publishers how they were going to manage and police this going forward, and they really didn't have great answers. And they said it's absolutely going to be a challenge. So I call myself Nickstradamus, and I'm gonna predict the future here a little bit and say that we're gonna have an issue with this. So the much younger, much cooler people at Talkpoint absolutely think I'm wrong. I think I'm right. So we'll see. So we'll go back in a couple of years, Larry, look at this video, and I may ask you to cut out this segment if it turns out I'm wrong.
Well, to your point, as big as our company is, we've got, I think, 160,000 employees, across 8 states and the District of Columbia. We have a social media policy, and it was developed out of our PR department at our national office, and it evolved as social media channels were, basically launched. And it's out there. It's on the internet. People could see it, and and it has that hierarchy where you're going to launch a blog, you're going to talk about the company, you need manager approval, you need the disclaimer, and all that. So
it's no longer social. The whole benefit of social is that it's spontaneous. It's people's thoughts. It's so funny. I was riding a cab in the city here today, and they have television screens in back of they always run these news blogs, and I saw Jerry Seinfeld was on one of the talk shows here locally in New York, and they did an outtake of something he said, and he said, he said he didn't understand Twitter. He said, because I instead of saying something meaningful to a few people, I could say totally nothing to a lot of people. So it was something like that. I'm paraphrasing. His delivery was much better than mine, but I said, it's kind of interesting, So it's communicating nothing to a large group of people versus communicating something meaningful to a small group. So we'll see. Our marketing guys are going to cringe to see this interview, but I said one time I wrote an article, and they that I had done for Stream Meeting Magazine, and I said social media is for your teenage daughter, not for serious grown-ups who want a webcast, and they made me edit that line out, so I'm sneaking it in now.
and it's interesting because social media, at least in our company, and this live webcasting, they're separate channels because our CIO does these events to reach employees, but he also has a leadership blog that's in another place that's where the conversation's happening, and he has deeper conversations. People want to know what the mobile strategy is. Come to the webcast, pose the question. If time allows, he'll be able to get to it because he's getting inundated, but also take that conversation over to the company blog. And it is internal. It's not, it's not out there. So, different channels.
Yeah, it's not really it's an intranet site, right?
It's a company. We're using Jive software, and it's an idea book, so people can comment and given.
Yeah, well, from that perspective, it's great. It's great, right? So it's funny because years ago, when we were heavily involved in financial markets back in the roadshow days, there's a lot of restrictions from the SEC perspective of what an analyst could say or could not say, especially prior to a public offering. So we developed something called a compliance loop into our tool set. So we'd have analysts at Goldman and Morgan Stanley do a self-service webcast, but they were not allowed to publish the webcast until it was sent to somebody from compliance, and then they went through and gave it the thumbs up or thumbs down, or made them edit a certain couple of certain tidbits if they said something that was incorrect, maybe perceived as hyping a stock prior to a public offering. And we still have that technology, and we still use it. It's going to be interesting when clients start putting a compliance loop into their social media strategy, where it's social right up to the once the compliance people approve it. So it's kind of having like the political director from the KGB there, just in case, policing the messaging. So right. It's compliant social media. It's not so social.
Wow, is brought to you.
Right, it's been authorized. It's been scrubbed and cleaned by the oversight committee.
Gosh, thanks so much for your time. I'm conscious.
No problem. All right, let's get together soon.